Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. Growing up, I valued stability and routine above all else. My parents, though never wealthy, created a nurturing environment centered on hard work and unwavering loyalty. They were high school sweethearts who married young, building a life together that served as my model of consistency and devotion. I hoped one day to share a similar bond with my future spouse, something built on mutual respect and genuine commitment. In college, I met Victoria, and I was immediately drawn to her. She was ambitious, intelligent, and vibrant in ways that made everyone around her seem dull by comparison. We fell in love quickly. I had just graduated with a degree in information technology and secured a position at a software firm in downtown Chicago, while Victoria continued her education, eventually earning her law degree from Northwestern. Our relationship felt predestined, and I supported her through law school without hesitation, believing wholeheartedly in our future together. Recently, my wife of 24 years left for a weekend getaway with her lover, Derek Sullivan. No reassurance, no affection, just a cold pat on the head as she walked out the door. Her indifference was chilling, and I found myself overwhelmed by uncertainty about what to do next. We married at 22. I had just started my IT job while Victoria pursued her law degree. I supported her through those demanding years because I loved her deeply and believed it would benefit us both. When she graduated, she landed a prestigious position at Grayson Associates, one of the top law firms in the Loop. She built a successful career, and though she eventually earned far more than I did, I was genuinely proud of her accomplishments. We postponed having children to focus on her career. Then, gradually, she decided against having any at all. We became what people call a dink couple, dual income, no kids. I didn't even know what form of birth control she used. Deep down, I resented her decision about children, but I tried to make peace with it and enjoy the life we had built together. Victoria was always the dominant partner in our marriage, and honestly, I didn't mind putting her needs first. However, her attitude shifted recently. Her libido increased noticeably, which benefited me, until last Thursday night when she casually informed me about her plans with Derek Sullivan. She needed new experiences, she explained, but still wanted to have fun with me too. There was no guilt in her voice, no hesitation. I knew arguing would be pointless. A cold emptiness settled over me. I didn't kiss her goodnight that evening, and I didn't say goodbye the next morning. In my mind, she was already dead to me. At work on Friday, I was a zombie, mechanically moving through tasks while dreading what Victoria had planned for that night. I knew I couldn't endure the humiliation of her plans. The thought of divorce terrified me. The legal battles, the financial devastation, the public shame. I felt trapped in a corner with no way out. Someone had to die. That's what kept running through my mind. When I got home that evening, Victoria was getting ready for her weekend date. While she showered and dressed, I retrieved the handgun from my briefcase and loaded it. My plan was simple: shoot Derek when he arrived to pick her up. I knew I'd end up in jail, probably for the rest of my life, but I didn't care anymore. But Derek just honked from his Maserati parked in our driveway. He never came to the door. Victoria patted my head like I was a dog as she left, grabbing her overnight bag without a backward glance. She didn't notice the loaded weapon tucked under the couch pillow. I actually growled as she walked out, a sound I didn't know I was capable of making. Despite my rage, I couldn't bring myself to shoot her. Running out to fire at the car felt absurd, theatrical. After they left, I sat in the silence of our home, the house we'd lived in for over 15 years in Lake Forest, a comfortable suburb north of Chicago. I spent hours looking through old photo albums. Happy times in Cancun, celebrating our 10th anniversary. A spring week in Paris. Our Caribbean cruises. None of it mattered anymore. None of it had been real. I had no support system left. My parents were gone. Dad from a heart attack 6 years ago. Mom from cancer 2 years later. I was an only child. Victoria had systematically distanced me from our few mutual friends over the years, and I'd been too blind to see it happening. Victoria had no interest in my life anymore. I'd become nothing more than a convenience, a reliable paycheck, a placeholder. I made some changes to our joint bank account, transferring funds to various children's charities. She denied me fatherhood. Let her money at least help some kids. I drafted an email to her law firm detailing the affair, attached it to a delayed send timer, and left a handwritten note with my wedding ring on the coffee table. I sat on the couch for a long time, reminiscing about better times, or what I'd believed were better times. Eventually, I found the courage to pick up the weapon. "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad," I mumbled, my voice breaking. "I hope to see you soon." I pulled the trigger. I was lying in bed with Derek Sunday morning and honestly hadn't thought about Marcus since I'd left the house Friday afternoon. I wasn't particularly pleased when Derek brought him up, but he had a point. Marcus's days of sleeping soundly through the night were probably over. Marcus had always been warm and loving, almost too much so. But sometimes a woman needs more excitement in her life. Real passion, not just comfortable routine. "I honestly didn't think about him at all this weekend," I said, stretching luxuriously against the hotel pillows. "You put him completely out of your mind?" Derek asked, propping himself up on one elbow. "Don't forget, he's a few years older than you. It's expected that he'd have some insecurity about this. Didn't you think about what we discussed earlier?" "You mean about the next step?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Derek replied, "just to make sure he understands how things will work going forward." "Don't worry about Marcus," I said dismissively. "He's a coward. He won't do anything. He didn't even try to stop me when I left Friday night." Derek's expression grew more serious. "Well, cats can turn into mountain lions when pushed too hard. Remember the Connor case?" He had a point. Jeffrey Connor had seemed like the most passive, agreeable husband imaginable, until his wife pushed too far, and he'd cleaned out their accounts and disappeared with their kids. That case had taken us months to unravel. "You said he didn't try to stop you," Derek continued carefully. "Did he say or do anything unusual?" "No, he just sat on the couch," I answered. "He hasn't said anything since I told him Thursday night." "Did he call or text you at all this weekend?" Derek asked, his tone shifting to something almost incredulous. "No, he hasn't." "You don't find that strange?" "Not really," I shrugged. "He knows how I act when I've made a decision." "Either that or he's already dumped you," Derek replied sharply. "You might want to consider that possibility." "He wouldn't dare," I retorted, feeling a flash of anger. "He knows I love him. This is just about physical needs. It's just sex." Derek looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between concern and disbelief, but then his face softened. "If you say so," he murmured. "Come here." We spent the rest of Sunday morning together before checking out and heading back to Chicago. As we pulled into my driveway late that evening, I noticed immediately that the yard hadn't been mowed. Something Marcus always did on Saturday mornings. Like clockwork. I made a mental note to talk to him about it. Just because I had new interests didn't mean everything else should change. "Are you ready for this?" Derek asked as he turned off the engine. "Of course," I replied confidently. "Say it," he instructed. I grabbed my weekend bag from the back seat and headed toward the front door, Derek following closely behind. As I turned my key in the lock, I thought with some relief that at least Marcus hadn't changed the locks. That would have been inconvenient. I opened the door and was immediately hit by a horrible smell. Thick, metallic, overwhelming. "What the hell is that?" I exclaimed, covering my mouth and nose with my hand. I peered inside and saw the living room. What I saw made my stomach lurch violently. I quickly slammed the door shut and ran into the yard, where I vomited into the bushes. "What's going on? Are you okay?" Derek asked, approaching me cautiously. "It's Marcus," I stammered between heaves. He's dead." "What? Dead?" Derek almost shouted. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I managed to say, wiping my mouth. "The couch is ruined, and there's a mess everywhere." "Oh God, what am I supposed to do?" "Well, call 911, Derek replied, his voice tight with nerves. "Thanks, Captain Hindsight," I snapped sarcastically. Derek recoiled slightly but quickly regained his composure. "I'm sorry, Victoria," I didn't mean. No, I'm sorry, I interrupted, trying to pull myself together. I didn't expect this. Would you stay until the police come? I can stay for a few minutes, Derek said reluctantly, glancing toward his Maserati as if calculating his exit strategy. But this is your situation to handle. I can't be too involved. Thanks, I said bitterly. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The operator was calm and professional, assuring me that police and emergency services were on their way. She suggested I wait outside, which I was more than happy to do given the smell. We waited in Derek's car, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. Marcus was dead. Actually dead. I hadn't wanted this. I'd wanted him to continue being my safety net, my reliable support system for when I got older and Derek or whoever else came after him lost interest. The thought of managing everything alone suddenly terrified me. Tears began rolling down my face, surprising me with their intensity. Derek awkwardly put his arm around my shoulders. You know you'll have to call Grayson, he said quietly. This is going to be in the papers. The firm doesn't like surprises. I know, I whispered. Howard Grayson was the managing partner of our firm, a man whose approval I'd spent years cultivating. You should call him now before the police arrive, Derek suggested. Get ahead of it. You're right, I said, forcing myself to think like a lawyer rather than a widow. I pulled myself together and dialed Howard's home number. He answered after the third ring, his voice carrying that distinctive deliberate tone that made junior associates nervous. Good evening, Victoria, Howard said. What can I do for you? Mr. Grayson, my husband is dead, I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to control it. It appears he took his own life. There was a pause. Well, that explains why he never responded to my email. I felt my blood run cold. An email, sir? Why would you be emailing Marcus? He sent a rather disturbing message to me Friday night, Howard replied in his usual measured tone. I saw it after dinner at the country club and responded right away, asking him to contact me to discuss the matter. Is it true? Is what true, sir? I asked, though I already knew where this was going. That you spent this weekend with Derek Sullivan and were physically intimate? Is that accurate? His relentless, prosecutorial tone left no room for evasion. Yes, sir, it's true, I admitted, fear for my career suddenly overwhelming everything else. The firm had a strict morals clause in our employment contracts. Lying would only make things worse when the truth inevitably came out. I'm sorry to hear that, Victoria. And about your husband. Have you called the police yet? Yes, sir. They're on their way now. You'll be busy for the next few days. Take a week's leave to handle your husband's arrangements. We'll discuss your future with the firm when you return. But I have the Wilson case, I protested weakly. Jennifer Walsh is your second chair, correct? He asked, though he knew perfectly well. He'd appointed her himself. Yes, sir. Jennifer is quite competent. I'll have her file for a continuance to get fully up to speed. Focus on your husband's arrangements. I'm very disappointed in you, Victoria. I understand, sir, I said, feeling numb. Is Mr. Sullivan with you now? Howard's tone remained emotionless. Yes, sir. Inform him to report to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Yes, sir. I'll tell him. Thank you. I'm sorry for your loss, Victoria. We'll talk later. Goodbye. The call ended. I stared at my phone, stunned. Howard had handled it like he was ordering coffee, not discussing a dead husband and a career-ending affair. I shook myself and looked at Derek grimly. Well? Derek asked, his anxiety visible now. Grayson wants to see you in the morning, I said flatly. Apparently Marcus sent him a letter about us. Shit. Derek sighed heavily. We're totally screwed. Probably, I finished his thought. Maybe they'll be lenient since we're both senior associates and this is a first offense? You don't really believe that, do you? Derek asked. Not really, I admitted. I'm so sorry, Derek. I'm sorry too. I'm as much to blame. I had no idea Marcus would react like this. At that moment, 2 police cars and a coroner's van arrived. An officer asked Derek to move his Maserati to allow the emergency vehicle's access. Another officer approached me, asking for identification. I showed him my driver's license. They entered the house, and as they opened the door, the smell hit them with full force. I saw them wince. The coroner's team began their work immediately. "Can you tell me what happened, Mrs. Bennett?" the officer asked, pulling out a notepad. "I left the house Friday afternoon," I said carefully. "Marcus, my husband, was alive, sitting on the couch. I came back tonight with a friend, and we found him like this." "Where were you over the weekend?" the officer asked. I hesitated, then decided honesty was the only option. "I was with Derek Sullivan. We were at the Palmer House downtown." The officer wrote this down without judgment. "And your husband knew about this?" "Yes, he knew," I said quietly. "When was the last time you spoke to him?" "Friday afternoon, before I left." "Did he seem upset or depressed?" "He was quiet," I admitted. "He'd been quiet since Thursday night when I told him about my plans." The officer nodded, continuing to take notes. After about 45 minutes, another officer emerged from the house. "Detective Morrison, this is Mrs. Bennett," the first officer said. A tired-looking man in his 50s approached me. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm very sorry for your loss. This appears to be a suicide. We found a note on the coffee table." My heart sank. "A note?" "Yes, ma'am. You'll be able to read it once we've completed our investigation. We'll need to ask you some more questions. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? You can't return to the house until we've finished processing the scene." "I can stay at a hotel," I said. "That would be best. We'll contact you tomorrow. Here's my card." I took the card with numb fingers. Derek drove me to a Holiday Inn near O'Hare Airport, far enough from Lake Forest that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. He helped me check in but didn't offer to stay. "I should go," he said awkwardly. "I need to prepare for tomorrow's meeting with Grayson." "I understand," I said, though I felt utterly abandoned. "Call me if you need anything," he said, but we both knew he wouldn't answer. After Derek left, I sat on the hotel bed, staring at nothing. I turned on the television for background noise but couldn't focus on any of it. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a restless sleep. I dreamed of Marcus. In the dream, he was standing in our bedroom, looking at me with an expression of profound sadness. His face was intact, unmarred. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with those eyes that had once gazed at me with such love. When I woke, my face was wet with tears. Monday morning arrived too soon. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Derek had texted at 5:30 a.m., heading to the office. "Good luck." My sister Caroline had also texted, "Saw the paper. Is that your Marcus who killed himself?" I stared at the message. The paper. Of course it would be in the paper. A suicide in Lake Forest would make the local news, maybe even the Tribune. "Yes," I texted back simply. "Call me later," Caroline replied. Caroline was 2 years older than me and had always played the mother hen role. I wasn't in the mood to be lectured by her, but I knew I'd have to face her eventually. I drove back to the house. The police tape had been removed, but the property still had an eerie quality in the morning light. I parked in the garage and steeled myself before entering. Inside, the smell of Marcus's blood had been replaced by the harsh odor of industrial cleaning products. A business card on the kitchen counter indicated that a crime scene cleanup company called Jack's Restoration Services had done the work. I walked slowly to the living room. The couch looked almost new, though I knew I'd never be able to sit on it again. The $6,000 Italian leather sectional we'd bought 3 years ago was tainted forever. I was briefly, irrationally angry at Marcus for not choosing his recliner instead. The painting above the couch, a landscape we'd bought in Door County, had been cleaned and saved. Small mercies. I went upstairs to our home office and gathered the folders containing Marcus's bank information, our wills, and the mortgage insurance policy, stuffing them into my briefcase. The house felt eerily quiet without him. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, and for a moment, I thought I smelled something rotten beneath the chemical cleaners. A chill ran down my spine, but I shook off the anxiety and continued my tasks. I realized I needed to notify Marcus's employer about his death. The answering machine had several messages from his supervisor, Allison Chun, wondering about his absence. I called back and was transferred to Allison's extension. Marcus Bennett's office, Allison speaking. Allison, this is Victoria Bennett. I'm calling about Marcus. Victoria, is everything okay? We've been calling all weekend. Is Marcus all right? No, Allison, I said, surprised by my own calm tone. He's dead. Dead? Oh my God. What happened? Did he have a heart attack? No, he shot himself, I said, marveling at how detached I sounded. There was a long pause. Oh no. I'm so sorry, Victoria. When did this happen? Friday night. I was away over the weekend. I'm so sorry for your loss. Please let us know about any memorial service. Everyone here will want to attend. I'll have HR contact you about his life insurance and 401k. Call if you need anything at all. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it. I hung up and felt a small sense of relief. That had gone better than expected. Marcus's company provided life insurance equal to 2.5 times an employee's salary, potentially $250,000. I hoped there wasn't a suicide exclusion clause. Combined with his 401k, it would provide some financial security. The house's eerie quietness pressed in on me again. We'd lived here for over 15 years, mostly good years. Now it felt like a mausoleum. Memories of Marcus were everywhere, though thankfully not his actual presence. I felt a chill and had the distinct sensation someone was watching me, but I assured myself I was alone. I opened windows to clear the chemical smell and left quickly, heading to our bank on Green Bay Road. At the bank, I asked the teller about Marcus's account balance. We'd had access to each other's accounts for emergencies, though I'd rarely needed to check his. The teller frowned at his computer screen, then excused himself to get Arnold Johnson, the branch manager. Mrs. Bennett, I'm glad you came in, Arnold said, gesturing me into his office. I was planning to call you later today. Oh? Why? I asked, feeling a sense of foreboding. Our fraud detection system flagged numerous transactions over the weekend from 2 of your joint accounts. I wanted to make sure you were aware. I know my husband made several charitable donations Friday without consulting me, I said carefully. I was hoping they could be stopped before they cleared. Arnold raised his eyebrows and turned his monitor toward me. I'm afraid they've all cleared, Mrs. Bennett. On Friday evening, Mr. Bennett transferred $237,000 from your primary joint account to various children's charities. St. Jude's, the Children's Hospital of Chicago, Make-A-Wish Foundation. He left exactly $24 in the account. I felt the blood drain from my face. $24. $1 for each year of our marriage. And his personal account? I asked weakly. Also emptied to various charities. He left himself $1. Is there any way to reverse these transactions? I'm afraid not, Arnold said sympathetically. They were legitimate transfers, properly authorized. Mr. Bennett even had the foresight to have them processed as expedited transfers. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Bennett. I understand from the police that your husband has passed away. If you need any documentation for estate purposes, please let us know. I left the bank in a daze. Marcus had gutted our finances in his final act. My own accounts were substantial. I'd always kept my earnings separate, but the loss of nearly $250,000 was staggering. I drove aimlessly for a while before finding myself at Westside Funeral Home in Wilmette. I hadn't consciously decided to go there, but I needed to make arrangements. A thin young man in a white shirt and tie greeted me at the entrance. Welcome to Westside Funeral Home. I'm Alan Markham. How can I help you today? I'm here about my husband, Marcus Bennett. Bennett? That name is familiar. Please, come into my office. He offered me coffee and sat at his computer, typing. Yes, I see him here. I actually tried to call him today, but he's dead, I said quietly. Alan's expression shifted to professional sympathy. I understand. I'm very sorry for your loss. When did this happen? Friday night. Alan looked at his screen, then back at me with a puzzled expression. Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Bennet came in Friday afternoon and made complete arrangements. He ordered and paid in full for a basic cremation service. It's unusual for clients to arrange and pay for their own services so far in advance unless they're terminally ill. Was he ill? No, I replied, feeling hollow. I see. Well then, we just need to finalize a few details. Do you have his death certificate? Not yet. His body was taken to the medical examiner Sunday night. I'll receive the certificate once they've completed their examination. Understood. When they release his body and you obtain the certificate, please let us know and we'll proceed. Now, regarding the service itself, we spent the next hour discussing arrangements. Marcus hadn't been a regular churchgoer, though he'd been raised Methodist. I decided on a simple cremation without a memorial service. When Alan asked if I wanted to keep Marcus's ashes, the thought made me shiver. No, I don't think so. No problem. Mr. Bennet paid for his remains to be interred in our columbarium garden, unless you'd prefer to take them. I left the funeral home feeling depressed and desperately needing to talk to someone. I sat in my car for several minutes before calling my sister Caroline, who worked part-time at the Lake County Library. Hey sis, Caroline answered. I was wondering when you'd call. I've been busy, I said. I didn't realize there would be so many details to handle. Can I stop by? I really need to talk. Of course, Caroline said in her warm, motherly voice. Jonathan's still at the hospital and won't be home until late, so we have plenty of time. Thanks, sis. I'll be there in a few minutes. I drove to her house in Libertyville, grateful for her steady presence. We'd always gotten along well, and I knew I could tell her almost anything. She greeted me at the door with a concerned expression. Would you like to talk over a cup of tea? Sure, I replied. Caroline went to the kitchen while I sat at her dining table, fidgeting nervously. She returned with 2 cups of hot tea. After adding sugar, I took a deep breath and began telling her about my weekend with Derek. Caroline listened quietly, her face neutral as I recounted everything, except for the specific plans I'd had for making Marcus watch. Some things even my sister didn't need to know. When I finished, Caroline was silent for a long moment. And here I thought you were smarter than me, she finally said, her tone flat and cutting. You became a big-time lawyer, married a man who supported you unconditionally, built a successful career. Was your weekend worth it? The question felt like a slap. It was supposed to be a short break, I objected weakly. I told Marcus it didn't mean anything. It was just physical, something I needed before I got too old. Just one weekend. He chose the coward's way out. The sex, huh? Caroline said in that same measured, motherly tone that somehow made everything worse. And you expected him to welcome you back like nothing happened? Come on, Victoria, you can't be that naive. I felt indignant. I was a beautiful woman. I'd maintained my figure, my appearance. I deserved to feel desired, validated. If Marcus had come home and said he was going away with another woman for the weekend, Caroline continued, would you have welcomed him back with open arms? I hadn't expected that from my sister. Marcus would never cheat on me. He wasn't that kind of person. And if he did, I'd destroy him in the divorce. Even as I spoke the words, I realized how they sounded. I just admitted to being exactly the kind of person I'd claimed Marcus wasn't. Caroline didn't blink. She knew me too well to be surprised. I see. So you can play around, but he couldn't? She asked in that same calm tone. Of course not, I protested, though I felt increasingly unsteady. He had no reason to need variety when he had me. I was the one who needed, who deserved it. Realizing I'd said too much, I quickly added, besides, it was only going to be once. Was it? Caroline asked. Or would you have gone further? Made Marcus accept it as your new arrangement? Maybe brought other men home? I was shocked. What do you think? That I'm some kind of... I'm just asking questions, Caroline said evenly. Did you do anything like this with Jonathan? Of course not, she replied. I love and respect Jonathan too much, but I know women who have. It was clear to me from your story that you no longer respected Marcus. That's not true. Then what did their husbands do? I interrupted, both defensive and curious. Most divorced their wives. Some went further, exposed the affairs to family and friends, emptied bank accounts. She paused. You still haven't answered my question. Was having fun with Derek worth jeopardizing 24 years of marriage? It suddenly hit me, the significance of the $24 Marcus had left in our account. $1 for each year of marriage. Caroline noticed my expression change. What's the matter? Marcus donated everything except $24 from our joint account to children's charities. I mumbled. Caroline actually giggled. That's not funny, I exclaimed. That account had 6 months of bills in it. No, it's not funny, Caroline agreed, though her eyes still held amusement. But you have to give him credit for style. What does that mean? I asked, growing angry. You denied him children, so he gave your money to children's charities. Knowing you didn't want kids, I'd say that was rather pointed. I just never wanted children, I objected sharply. It's my body. And Marcus respected that, Caroline said with a sigh. I wish you'd respected him as much. But I'm sure you told him about not wanting kids before the wedding, right? I looked away, unable to meet her eyes. I respected and loved him. I protested, but it sounded weak even to me. Really? I'd hate to see what you'd do if you didn't love him. Caroline's voice turned sharp. And you're so calm about his death. That concerns me, Victoria. That hit a nerve. What was I supposed to do? Break down and cry? I'm left alone with all these responsibilities. I have to move on. If I fall apart, it won't change anything. No, but it might help you process what happened, Caroline said more gently. You didn't even cry when Dad died. A long pause followed. Caroline looked me directly in the eye. You're either holding everything in and you're a potential time bomb, you're a functional psychopath, or you're deeply numb emotionally. Sooner or later, it's all going to come out. Emotions have never been my strong suit, I replied softly, trying to push away the discomfort her words caused. Yeah, I know, Caroline sighed. So what now? I have no choice but to move forward, I said bitterly. No, you don't. But Jonathan and I will be here for you. We may not approve of your choices, but you're still family. Thank you, Caroline. I really appreciate that. We spent the next hour making small talk, which helped ease some of my anxiety. Caroline's phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. Jonathan's on his way home, she said, glancing at the message. Would you like to stay for dinner? It'll just be leftovers. Your leftovers are always better than anything I cook, I said with a weak smile. I'd love to stay. We had a pleasant dinner, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. Jonathan was less talkative than usual but showed some reserved empathy. When he arrived, he nodded at me and exchanged quick, subtle gestures with Caroline. That deep married communication that comes from years together. I looked away, wondering when Marcus and I had lost that connection. Had we ever really had it? Dinner was lasagna. Caroline always cooked for a large family even though their kids were grown and gone. She also served her homemade apple pie, which I'd always loved. I accepted a generous slice despite having no real appetite. We ended with small glasses of wine and light conversation. When I realized it was getting late, I thanked them and headed for the door. Caroline stopped me, putting her arm around my shoulders. We really love you, Victoria, she whispered, hugging me tightly. Thank you, I whispered back, surprised by the sudden emotion. I love you too. If you need anything, just call, Jonathan added quietly. I drove back to the hotel, my mind churning. In my room, I turned on the television for background noise, changed into my nightgown, and lay down. My eyes were on the screen, but my mind kept replaying my conversation with Caroline. Was I really as indifferent and selfish as she'd suggested? Exhaustion finally overtook me, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. I dreamed again. This time, Marcus was leaning against the wall of the hotel room, looking down at me. But something was wrong with his face. The right side was damaged, dark. I could see bone. Why are you here? I asked, my voice thick with sleep. You're dreaming, he said simply. Are you going to haunt every dream I have now? I asked, feeling a cold pit forming in my stomach. That's the plan, he replied with a crooked smile that looked grotesque on his ruined face. So you really think I'm an uncaring, emotionless, selfish bitch? I asked, trying to sound bold but feeling my voice shake. Your actions speak for themselves, he said. The dream shifted, and suddenly I was watching scenes from our life together on the television screen. Our wedding day, we'd looked so young, so full of hope. Marcus's face beaming as I walked down the aisle. The early years of our marriage, eating ramen noodles and cheap pasta while saving money so I could finish law school. I watched myself change over the years, becoming more focused on my career, more dismissive of Marcus's needs and dreams. The conversation where I told him I didn't want children. I'd waited until after we were married, when it would be harder for him to leave. I saw myself brushing aside his attempts at romance, rolling my eyes at his suggestions for date nights, prioritizing work events over time with him. You should have been honest from the beginning that you didn't want kids, Marcus's voice said from somewhere in the dream. I wanted to be a father. You knew that. I woke with a gasp, my heart pounding. The hotel room was dark and quiet. The television had turned itself off. I was alone, but my face was wet with tears, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd cried. I didn't sleep again that night. Tuesday morning, I woke up feeling drained despite having spent the night in bed. My body felt heavy, like I was carrying the weight of Marcus's death on my shoulders. I got out of bed slowly, every movement requiring conscious effort. I showered, letting the hot water run over me for longer than necessary, hoping it would wash away some of the guilt and exhaustion. Didn't. I brushed my teeth, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me didn't look like me anymore. Hollow eyes, pale skin, new lines around my mouth. I looked and felt terrible, old, defeated. I packed my things mechanically, had a bland breakfast at the hotel restaurant where I could barely taste the food, and checked out. The clerk processed my payment without making eye contact, and I wondered if he'd read about Marcus in the Tribune. Driving back to Lake Forest, I dreaded entering the house. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for several minutes, gathering courage. The house smelled better than yesterday thanks to Jack's cleanup crew, but it still felt like a crypt. A beautiful, expensive crypt. The bedroom was cold as a refrigerator when I entered it. Passing the couch in the living room felt like walking past an open freezer. I could still see Marcus sitting there in my mind, the gun tucked under the pillow. The thought of ever sitting on it again made me physically ill. I didn't know what Marcus would do next. Would he only haunt my dreams? Or would he find ways to torment me during my waking hours too? I paced around the house, taking inventory of Marcus's things, trying to decide what to do with them. His clothes, his books, his Cubs memorabilia. Everything would need to be dealt with eventually. Then I realized I needed to talk to Gerald Morris, a certified estate planner at our firm. He'd probably be upset that I'd already informed the bank about Marcus's death without consulting him first. Estate planners like to control the process, but I wasn't too concerned. I had more important things to worry about than Gerald's professional pride. I called him. I wondered when you'd call, Gerald said, answering on the second ring. I kept my tone businesslike, explaining what I had done. He assured me everything would be handled. It was a perk of working at a law firm and would relieve a huge burden. Thanks, Gerald. I really appreciate it, I said, trying to sound sincere despite my exhaustion. No problem. It's what I get paid for, he replied. Can you gather all your financial documents and bring them to me this afternoon? Say 3 o'clock. Yes, I'll be there at 3 o'clock. Works for me. I spent the morning gathering what I needed, including a copy of Marcus's will. The house felt eerie. Occasional cold gusts blew through despite all the doors and windows being closed. I heard creaks upstairs, like someone walking around, but I chalked it up to nerves and kept packing. A hot shower calmed me somewhat, and I changed into something less casual than jeans but more casual than my usual business suits. At the office, the atmosphere hit me like a physical force. Everyone looked at me cheerfully at first, that automatic professional smile, then quickly looked away when they remembered who I was and what I'd done. It was obvious they all knew about my weekend with Derek. The emails Marcus had sent had done their job. My cheeks flushed hot with shame as I hurried past their cubicles, keeping my eyes down. "Going casual these days, Victoria?" Howard Grayson's voice came from behind me, cutting through the awkward silence. I turned to see him standing in the hallway, arms crossed. He was smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. There was disappointment there and something else, pity maybe. "I came to see Gerald about Marcus's arrangements," I said defensively, my voice sounding thin and weak even to my own ears. "It's the most sensible thing you've done since Friday," he replied evenly, his tone measured but cutting. "When you're done, come to my office for a few minutes." "Sure," I said, my stomach knotting into a tight ball. Howard was the managing partner, an old-fashioned gentleman who valued propriety and discretion above almost everything else. I recognized an order when I heard one, and this was definitely an order, not a request. I finally reached Gerald's office. He waved me in with a forced smile, offered coffee, and I handed him my papers. We discussed everything while he reviewed them. "Everything seems in order," Gerald said. "I'll take care of it. Anything else?" "I need to amend my will and trust," I said. "That makes sense," he replied, pulling out my folder. "Your husband is currently listed as beneficiary, executor, and holder of medical power of attorney. Who would you like to replace him with?" "I'd like my sister Caroline Porter to replace him in all capacities, and give her power of attorney as well, just in case." "Very well. Just write it in pencil and initial it. I'll make the formal changes in a day or so." "Thanks, Gerald." I ended our meeting and walked to Howard's office, noting his secretary Patricia's caustic look, as if I were a nuisance she'd rather not deal with, a stain on the firm's reputation that needed to be removed as quickly and quietly as possible. "Victoria, come in. Have a seat," Howard said with a pleasant smile that didn't quite mask his disappointment. He gestured to one of the leather chairs across from his massive oak desk, the same desk where I'd sat for my first interview 20 years ago, young and ambitious and full of hope. "How are you holding up?" "It's been a challenge," I replied cautiously, perching on the edge of the chair. "It sounds like you didn't sleep well," Howard remarked with what seemed like genuine concern, though I suspected it was more about my professional appearance than my personal well-being. "It wasn't easy," I admitted, hesitating to tell him about my dreams of Marcus's mutilated face, the accusations, the blood. Howard nodded slowly and continued, his voice taking on that formal tone he used when delivering bad news to clients. "You're probably wondering why I asked to meet. The senior partners held an emergency conference call this morning. We're not happy, Victoria. Your husband sent emails to everyone in the firm Friday night. Attorneys, staff, even some of our clients. It detailed your affair with Derek Sullivan in rather explicit terms. This information has almost certainly leaked outside our walls by now. Your personal and professional credibility has taken a serious hit. The firm's reputation is at risk by association. The only reason you haven't been fired outright is your exemplary 20-year record here." Each word felt like a small knife. I sat there, absorbing the blow, understanding what was coming next. I pondered his words and what he didn't say, that my career in Chicago legal circles was effectively over, that no respectable firm would touch me now. His look, sympathetic but firm, made me make a decision I hoped I wouldn't regret. "Maybe I should tender my resignation," I said quietly, feeling knots tighten in my stomach. "Better to jump than be pushed." Howard pretended to consider it, taking off his reading glasses and polishing them with his handkerchief, giving me a moment to process what I just offered. Then he nodded slowly. "As much as I'd like to keep you, Victoria, I think it's for the best. Given your service and record, the partners will agree to keep you on the payroll until the end of the month. This will give you time to handle your husband's matters and make arrangements. We'll also put together a reasonable severance package, 3 months' salary, plus your accrued vacation time. You're smart and driven. You'll get back on your feet." "Thank you, Mr. Grayson," I said quietly. It felt surreal, like I was floating above my body, watching this happen to someone else. Sure, you might want to consider a change of scenery. Have you ever been to Boise? In Idaho? No, why? I replied, puzzled. A high school buddy of mine is managing a firm there and needs someone with your experience. I can give him your name if you're interested. Sure, I replied hesitantly. Great, I'll let him know. Here's his card. Howard handed me a business card. I glanced at it and put it in my purse. Can I ask about Derek? What's going to happen to him? Howard looked thoughtful for a moment before answering. I can't go into details, but let's just say Mr. Sullivan has exhausted any goodwill he had here. You're not the first associate whose marriage he's ruined. That's why he was transferred here from our New York office after his divorce. His ex-wife caught him with a paralegal. The lawsuit settlement required us to keep him employed and pay generous alimony. I didn't know that, I said quietly, stunned. I knew Derek had a reputation, which is partly why I'd chosen him for my affair. But I hadn't known all this. Well, I have a meeting. I'm sorry for your loss, Victoria. I'm sure I'll see you again before you leave. Howard stood up to signal the meeting's end. I'll be back. I still have some papers to sign. Thank you for everything. I shook his hand, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over, and hurried out of the office. I could feel eyes on me as I walked through the hallways. Attorneys who'd once sought my advice, paralegals who'd respected my work, colleagues who'd been friends. Now they all looked away or whispered to each other as I passed. Once in my car in the parking garage, the tears I'd been holding back finally broke free. I burst into uncontrollable sobs, my whole body shaking. I loved this job. I'd loved it more than I'd loved Marcus. I realized with a sick, twisting shame. I loved the people I worked with, the intellectual challenges, the respect I commanded in a courtroom, the satisfaction of winning a difficult case. I'd been here for over 2 decades, more than half my adult life. This place had been my identity, my purpose, my validation. And now it was gone. Because of one weekend. One stupid, selfish weekend. The thought of moving to Boise, a city I'd never even visited, where I knew no one, starting over at 46 years old as damaged goods, felt like exile, like being banished to Siberia. Eventually I calmed down enough to drive, though it was difficult with blurred vision from crying. I fumbled with the ignition, my hands shaking. Navigating through downtown Chicago's loop traffic was treacherous in my condition. I almost rear-ended a taxi at a stoplight. A delivery truck honked at me when I drifted into their lane. My reflexes were slow, my attention scattered. I finally made it onto the highway heading north toward Lake Forest, grateful I hadn't caused an accident. The last thing I needed was a car crash on top of everything else. I sat on the couch, burying my face in my hands and sobbing uncontrollably. Not over Marcus, I realized with shame, but over the loss of my job. I cried until I heard a sharp crack in the living room. Surprised, I looked up and saw our framed wedding photo lying face down on the side table. The glass shattered into pieces. Goosebumps ran through me as I realized what had just happened. I'd been crying more over my job than over Marcus. The photo had fallen or been thrown, as if in response to my priorities. Frightened, I threw the broken frame aside and looked around to see if anything else had moved. I couldn't explain how the picture had fallen so forcefully. The table was stable. There was no breeze, no vibration. Then it hit me. It had to be Marcus. I went from frightened to angry, from horror to rage. Leave me alone. I screamed into the empty room. You're dead. Go away. Stop messing with me. Damn it. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. The house darkened as if storm clouds had covered the sun, though I could see it was still bright outside. I almost expected to see objects flying off the walls. Then I thought I heard it. Maniacal laughter echoing from the stairs. There was no way I could stay in this house alone. I grabbed my phone and called Caroline in a panic. Hey sis, what's up? She answered cheerfully. Not great. Can I spend the night with you guys? Please. I pleaded, my voice shaking. Her tone instantly turned concerned. Of course. We'll get the guest room ready. Is everything okay? No, it's not. I'll explain when I get there. Thank you. I ran upstairs to pack my overnight bag, throwing things in hastily. I had to leave before Marcus did something else. I held the banister tightly as I went back downstairs, half convinced Marcus would push me if I wasn't careful. I rushed to the garage, threw my stuff in the car, and drove away, leaving skid marks on the pavement. Caroline met me at the door in Libertyville, and I collapsed into her arms, sobbing. She comforted me and got me to sit on the couch, calming me down enough to speak. "Good God, sis, what happened? Did someone break in?" she asked, alarmed. "It's much worse. It's Marcus," I replied. "Marcus? He's dead. What can he do?" Caroline asked, looking at me strangely. I told her about the nightmares from the past 2 nights and what had just happened at the house. The photo falling, the temperature drop, the laughter. She listened silently as I babbled. "He's trying to drive me crazy. I know he is. Honey, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you just need to relax and get a good night's sleep," Caroline suggested gently. "No, you don't understand. His suicide note said he hoped I'd see his face every time I closed my eyes, and I have. I haven't slept properly since Sunday, and I quit my job today to avoid getting fired." I sobbed again. "Oh no. What about the house and bills?" she asked, concerned. "I have the money. The insurance will cover the mortgage. I'm working until the end of the month, and I've been promised severance pay. But I can't stay in that place. Marcus hates me. He'll destroy me if I stay." "Come on, sis, that's extreme. How can a dead person hurt you?" Caroline asked, trying to reason with me. "But you weren't there," I protested. "No, I wasn't. Let me take your things upstairs. Then I'll make you some tea and a grilled cheese sandwich. That should help you calm down, and then we can talk properly. Okay?" "Okay," I said, feeling like a scared schoolgirl. Caroline carried my things upstairs and made tea and grilled cheese sandwiches in the kitchen. She brought them on a tray to the living room and sat with me. The tea, flavored with honey, and the sandwich brought back childhood memories of Mom taking care of us when we were sick. It helped me relax. "Feeling better?" Caroline asked soothingly. "Yes, much better," I replied with a sigh. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Have you told anyone else about seeing Marcus?" "No. Are you kidding? I'd be institutionalized." "Not necessarily. You've been through a lot, severe trauma. Seeing Marcus in your dreams must have been a shock. Maybe you should take a few days off. I can talk to Jonathan about letting you stay at the lake house. A few days in the country might do you good." "You may be right." Howard also suggested I get away. He mentioned Boise. "Boise? What's in Boise?" Caroline asked, surprised and amused. "A friend of his manages a law firm there and needs a good lawyer." "Are you going to call him?" "I suppose I should, but I'd hate to leave here. You and Jonathan are my only family right now." I took another sip of tea. "By the way, I changed my will and trust today. You're now my sole beneficiary and executor. I've also given you power of attorney. I hope you don't mind." "No, of course not," Caroline said. "But you're young. You'll be around for a long time." "I hope so. Still, I like to be prepared." We ate and drank in silence for a couple of minutes. "I really messed up, didn't I?" I whispered. "You haven't been helping your case lately," Caroline admitted diplomatically. "I guess I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. And look what it cost you," Caroline said quietly. I already knew what my actions had cost me. My husband of 24 years, my career, and my peace of mind. All because I wanted a fling with Derek Sullivan. "Yeah," I sighed. "But it's too late to cry over spilled milk. Like Mom used to say. You need to pull yourself together, sis." "You're right. Maybe I'll take you up on your offer and get my mind right again. Right now, I just need sleep." I yawned deeply. The tea had done its job, and I felt my eyelids getting heavy. "Let's get you upstairs," Caroline said. She helped me up and led me to the guest room. I barely managed to slip into my nightgown before collapsing under the covers. "Thank you," I mumbled, "for everything." "You're welcome. Now get some sleep," Caroline said, kissing my forehead. She closed the door as she left, and I dozed off almost immediately. So you thought you could get away from me by running to your sister's house? Marcus's sarcastic voice woke me. The room was filled with thick gray mist, and I couldn't see clearly. Then Marcus stepped out of the closet, skull fragments visible on his head. Why are you here? Why can't you leave me alone? I asked desperately. Leave you alone? Ha! I'll never leave you alone, you witch, Marcus growled. His disfigured face twisted in anger. You were the one in the house, weren't you? Making the photo fall? Yes, he grinned. It took effort, but now I know I can do it. I can follow you anywhere. Please, can't you just leave me alone? You're dead. You have to move on. Yes, I'm dead. But whose fault is that? He retorted. You pulled the trigger. I protested. Yeah, I pulled the trigger. It was either me or your boyfriend. Marcus snapped back. You were going to make me watch, weren't you? You and Derek in our bed. That's what he meant about the next step. I couldn't answer. He was right. How was it supposed to be? He shouted, his eyes flashing crimson. Should I have gone along with your affairs? Left divorce papers behind and let your law firm destroy me publicly? Maybe burned down the house and spent years in prison? I had no options left, so I chose the only one that gave me some self-respect and revenge. I'm sorry. I pulled the trigger because it was my only choice. Now my blood is on your hands. Look, I saw my hands covered in dark red blood, dripping onto Caroline's white bedspread. You may not see it in daylight, but it's still there. Nothing can remove it, Marcus added. He staggered back, more pieces of his shattered head falling but disappearing before hitting the floor. I have unfinished business. I can't move on until it's completed. By the way, was your fling with Derek worth it? You lost me and your job, Marcus continued. I know how much that job meant to you. Please, Marcus, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done it. Please go away. I protested weakly. You don't get it? Marcus replied, his tone softening in a way that was somehow more terrifying. You shouldn't have even thought about it. But you still think this is all about you. And as for leaving you alone, that's not going to happen. Ever. Please. I was crying now. I'm begging you. I can't take this anymore. I wanted a faithful wife who loved me as much as I loved her. How did that turn out? Marcus said quietly. Then he muttered, enjoy the rest of your pathetic life, and burst into laughter. He disappeared into the closet, and the fog drifted away. The blood on my hands and on Caroline's bedspread vanished. I collapsed onto the pillow, crying. The next moment, I saw sunlight through the window. I smelled bacon from downstairs. I checked the bedspread, no trace of blood. I did my morning routine, got dressed, and went downstairs. I didn't feel much better, but at least not worse. Good morning, Jonathan said cheerfully, sitting with his morning coffee. Caroline's almost done with breakfast. Have some coffee and sit down. Thanks, I guess I will. I greeted Caroline, who was putting bacon on a plate. I grabbed my coffee and sat down. How did you sleep? Jonathan asked worriedly, eyeing my haggard face. Not well, I admitted. Did you see him again? Caroline asked, placing bacon and scrambled eggs on the table. I glanced at her, then at Jonathan, who looked concerned but not shocked. I realized Caroline had shared my secrets with him, but I accepted it. They were a real couple. Yeah, I replied. Am I going crazy? I'm a surgeon, not a psychiatrist, Jonathan replied with a slight smile. But from what Caroline told me, you're under enormous psychological trauma and stress. These nightmares are your mind's way of processing Marcus's death and your guilt. It's a completely understandable response. You're probably right, I said, not wanting to list all my woes. But you might want to talk to our staff psychiatrist at the hospital, Dr. Ellen Rodriguez. She's very good and might help you. I might, I said non-committally. We ate scrambled eggs and bacon. Caroline was the best cook since our mother died, and her eggs were delicious. We also talked about you spending some time at the lake house, Jonathan said. We don't mind if you stay there for a few days to calm down. That would be nice, I said. I knew the medical examiner wouldn't release Marcus's body until the end of the week, and I had 3 more weeks before my official termination from the firm. Maybe a few days at the lake would help. Good. I'll give you the key before I leave. Can you handle driving? I can handle it, I replied with a smile. We finished breakfast, and I helped Caroline clear the table. Jonathan handed me the cabin key from his pocket. I'd been there many times and knew the way. Have a peaceful vacation, Jonathan said. Thank you both for everything, I said, hugging them. Call if you need anything, Caroline said. I packed up and left, deciding against going home for more clothes after yesterday's incident. I didn't want to be in that house again. I stopped at a Walmart in Kenosha to buy supplies and hit the road, driving down Highway 42 through Wisconsin with the windows down and the radio on. I felt the wind in my hair and anticipated a few days of peace. I was about half an hour from Fish Creek when it happened. Nice day for a drive, isn't it? I heard from the passenger seat. Stunned, I saw Marcus sitting there, looking out the window with sunlight shining through the exit wound in his head. What are you doing here? I almost shouted. You fell asleep at the wheel. Not very safe, Marcus said. Watch the road, intersection ahead. My world shattered as a huge 18-wheeler slammed into my door. The impact sent the car spinning, and I was hit again by another truck. My car ended up in a ditch upside down. Airbags deployed. Water was pouring in from the ditch. I'll see you later, Marcus said before I passed out. 25 years later. Hello, Mrs. Pierce, the cheerful receptionist said as Caroline signed in at Lakeview Manor Nursing Facility in Waukegan. Hello, Amy, Caroline replied. How is my sister today? Let me get April for you, Amy said. April Callahan, the head nurse, emerged from the hallway. Mrs. Pierce, good to see you. Victoria's condition is the same. She sits in her wheelchair most of the day, watching TV or looking out the window. Nights are hardest for her. She insists she sees her dead husband in her dreams. Caroline knew this. Victoria had been dealing with severe PTSD and trauma-induced hallucinations since the accident. 25 years, and her sister still couldn't escape the guilt. Dr. Martinez noted that Victoria has come to terms with the hallucinations. April continued. She knows they're not real, symptoms of psychological trauma, but she can't make them stop. They're less terrifying now than they used to be, but they're still constant. That's something, I suppose, Caroline said sadly. Something odd happened the other day, April said. Oh, you know the wedding photo on her dresser? I was in her room helping with lunch when the picture suddenly fell forward and shattered the glass. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Maybe there was a draft? Caroline suggested, feeling a chill. No, all the windows were closed, and no fans were running. That's odd, Caroline said carefully. She remembered Victoria mentioning that strange things had happened at her house before the accident. Objects moving, pictures falling. The psychiatrists had attributed it to Victoria's deteriorating mental state, her guilt manifesting in perceived supernatural events. The strangest thing was Victoria's reaction, April continued. She just smiled and said, "He's still mad at me. Does that make sense to you?" Oddly enough, it does, Caroline replied with a sad smile. I'll tell you about it someday. I have to make my rounds, but the front desk wants to talk to you about her benefits before you leave. I'll stop by, Caroline promised. She reached Victoria's room. Her sister sat in her motorized wheelchair, staring out the window, a frail 71-year-old woman, a shadow of the vibrant attorney she'd once been. Caroline remembered the accident as if it were yesterday. Victoria had been on her way to the lake house when she ran a red light at a rural intersection and was struck by an 18-wheeler, then hit again by another truck. The police report concluded she'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Exhaustion and stress from her husband's recent suicide, combined with sleeping pills in her system. Victoria had to be extracted using the jaws of life. She'd nearly drowned as water filled the overturned car. The trucking companies were cleared of any fault. She'd slipped into a coma and remained unresponsive for 3 weeks. When she finally woke, doctors discovered she was paralyzed from the neck down, a quadriplegic. She would never walk again, never use her hands again, never live independently again. Caroline and Jonathan had blamed themselves for years. They should have driven her to the cabin. They should have seen how unstable she was. The years that followed had been financially devastating. Victoria's law firm's health insurance covered initial hospital expenses, but not long-term care costs. Caroline, with power of attorney, had been forced to use Victoria's funds, her 401k, Marcus's 401k and life insurance, eventually selling the Lake Forest house. Most of the money had gone to medical expenses. Now, covered by Medicare and Medicaid, Victoria still had significant out-of-pocket costs. After 25 years, the money was nearly gone. Caroline feared Victoria might soon need to transfer to a less comfortable facility. "Look what I brought you," Caroline said brightly, pulling a new Afghan from her bag. "I just finished it yesterday. It's so cute," Victoria squeaked. "Thank you. I thought it would keep you warm at night," Caroline said, draping it over Victoria's legs. "I'm sure it will," Victoria said, looking out the window. A moment of silence passed. "Can you keep a secret?" Victoria asked quietly. "Of course," Caroline replied. "That weekend I spent with Derek. I haven't told Marcus yet, but I've realized it wasn't worth the cost," Victoria said as a tear rolled down her face. The room's temperature dropped noticeably. The hospital bed rattled quietly. Caroline looked fearfully at the bed, then back at her sister. Victoria didn't seem afraid, just sad, resigned. The psychiatrists had explained it thoroughly over the years. Victoria suffered from severe, treatment-resistant PTSD and persistent complex bereavement disorder. The hallucinations, visual and auditory, were her mind's way of processing overwhelming guilt. They weren't supernatural. They were neurological. Caroline believed the doctors. She had to. But sometimes, in moments like this, when the temperature dropped and the bed rattled, Caroline wondered. Victoria had lost everything. Her career, her health, her independence. She'd spent a quarter-century in a wheelchair, dependent on others for every basic need, tormented by nightmares and hallucinations. She would die in this nursing home, probably within the next few years, having spent more than a third of her life paying for one weekend of selfish pleasure. "I think he already knows, dear," Caroline said quietly, pulling the Afghan higher on her sister's thin legs. The room's temperature returned to normal. The bed stopped rattling. Caroline stayed for another hour, talking about her grandchildren, about the weather, about nothing important. When she finally kissed Victoria's forehead and said goodbye, her sister was staring out the window again, lost in thoughts Caroline could only imagine. As Caroline signed out at the front desk, Amy looked up with her perpetual smile. "Same time next week, Mrs. Pierce?" "Same time next week," Caroline confirmed. She walked to her car and sat for a moment before starting the engine. 25 years. 25 years of this, and probably a few more to come. Victoria had gotten exactly what she'd asked for. Caroline reflected bitterly. She'd wanted excitement, passion, freedom from the boring routine of a faithful marriage. She'd wanted to feel alive. Well, she was alive. Trapped in a body that didn't work, haunted by guilt she couldn't escape, paying every single day for one weekend that wasn't worth the cost. Caroline started the car and drove home to Jonathan, to their warm house, to their comfortable, boring, faithful life together. And she was grateful for every moment of it. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.